The storm came up the Coldshelf, the way storms always did on Tannies, not as weather, but as an argument. Emmett Larke felt it in the fence wire before he saw it in the sky. He was 19 years old, 6 kilometers of stormvine trellis to his name, and a habit of resting his palm flat on the top wire when he walked the rows, because the wire told him things. It hummed when the charge was building. It buzzed when the charge was close. And when it went suddenly, perfectly silent, the way it went silent now, under his hand, like an animal deciding not to breathe, it meant the front had crossed the 9 Sisters and was coming down the shelf with the whole weight of the northern plain behind it. He had maybe 40 minutes. "Scupper," he said. The dog was already moving. She was a lean, ugly, brindle thing with one torn ear and an opinion about everything, and she had been born on this ridge and had never once in her life needed to be told twice about a storm. She went low along the row, belly to the frost, hurting him more than he was hurting her. Emmett walked fast. He did not run, because his father had taught him that running on the shelf in the cold was how you got sweat in your clothes, and how sweat in your clothes was how you died. And Del Larke had died anyway, 2 winters back, so the lesson had a bitterness to it that Emmett had never fully worked out of his mouth. But he walked fast. The homestead sat where the shelf broke, a long, low, half-buried house of poured stone and salvage plate, its roof turfed and pinned, its windows small and deep as gun ports because the wind here did not knock. Behind it, the barn. Behind the barn, the ketch pond, black and skinned with ice. And above it all, throwing its long, thin shadow across the whole, holding like the hand of a clock, the mast. The pull tower. 30 meters of lattice steel with a Corona ring at the top and 11 capacitor cans in the shed at its foot, and every storm that came off the 9 Sisters gave the Larks a little of itself on the way past. It ran the pumps, the heaters, the dryers in the vine sheds, the lights in the house. It was the only genuinely clever thing on the property, and his father had built it out of a wrecked ore hauler's spine and pure stubbornness. He got the west shed closed and the vent hoods cranked shut and the last of the drying racks turned and covered. He walked the harvester frame, pillar, 4-legged, 11 years old, 1 bad hip and a grudge, into the barn and folded it down, because pillar's gyros did not love a crosswind. The sky went the color of a bruise under a fingernail. And that was when Scupper stopped, 30 meters out in the eastern rows, and did not bark. That was the thing that made the hair stand up on Emmett's arms. Scupper barked at everything. She barked at ridgehawks and drift elk and the sound of the ice ticking on the ketch pond. She had once barked at the moon for 2 hours. And now she stood in row 19 with her legs braced and her torn ear flat and her whole body pointed like a dropped compass, and she made no sound at all. "Hey," Emmett said, and his own voice came out wrong. "Hey, Scup." He went out to her. The stormvine grew in tall corded ropes on the trellis, black, green, and rattling, and in the failing light the rows were channels of shadow, and in row 19 the shadow was the wrong shape. There was a body in it. Not a drift elk, not a wirecat. Emmett's brain tried both of those first, honestly and desperately, and then it ran out of lies. She was long. That was the first thing his mind could hold. She was long, longer than a person had any business being, folded against the base of the trellis with her back to the post, and one arm hooked up through the wire as if she had climbed it and then simply stopped. Her skin, where the last light touched it, was the gray of wet slate. Her hair was white and had come out of whatever had bound it, and it was frozen in a sheet against the trellis post. She wore something that had been armor and was now mostly a suggestion of armor. A long dark coat of segmented plates, split open down the left side, and the split was the color of an old penny. Copper, her blood was copper. She was Kethran. Emmett Larke had seen exactly 4 Kethran in his life. 2 in Kethran at the assay office in gray and gold, being polite and enormous. 1 on the district feed, reading out the shipping schedule. And 1, when he was 11, walking the perimeter of the colony survey with a rifle across his back, who had looked at Emmett for 2 full seconds and then looked away, the way a man looks at a fence post. They owned the sky. That was the shape of it. The Kethran ascendancy owned the sky and 11 of the 12 real worlds in this arm of nothing, and human beings had been granted the Coldshelf, this frozen shelf on this marginal planet, the way you might grant a stray the corner of a barn. And one of them was bleeding to death in his vines. She was not dead. He knew that because she moved. Her head came around slow, terribly slow, and her eyes opened. They were not like the ones in Kethran. Those had been eyes like polished coins. Hers were pale, almost white, the pupils slotted, and a second lid came across them sideways and cleared them of frost with a small wet click. She looked at him, and her hand went, without hurry, without hope, to the hilt of something at her hip. It took her 3 tries to close her fingers on it. She never got it out of its sheath. That was what did it. Emmett would think about that later, on nights when he could not sleep, and he would keep coming back to that one detail. Not the blood, not the size of her, not the fact that she was the first alien to ever set foot on his father's land. It was that she reached for a blade she did not have the strength to lift, and she reached for it anyway, because she had decided she was going to die trying. Scupper whined once. The wind changed. Emmett felt it come across the back of his neck like a hand. 40 minutes, he'd thought. He'd been wrong, he had 10. Okay, he said out loud to nobody. His breath went white and tore away sideways. Okay, okay. He put his rifle down. It was an old slug gun, a culling piece for wirecats, and he had been carrying it slung across his back the whole time without once thinking of it. He laid it in the frost, because a thing with a weapon is a different animal than a thing without one, and he needed her to see the difference. Then he walked into the row with his hands out and open. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. She watched him come. Her lips pulled back off her teeth. They were flat and white, and there were more of them than there should have been, and a sound came out of her, low and ragged, and it was not a word in any language, and it did not need to be. It meant stay back. "Yeah," Emmett said, "I know." He kept coming. He crouched down an arm's length from her and put his hands on his knees where she could see them. "You're going to die out here," he said. "In about an hour, not from that." He nodded at her side. "From the cold. It's going to drop 40 degrees when that front hits, and the wind is going to come down this row like a train, and it will not care what you are." He swallowed. "My house is right there. There's a fire in it." She said something. It was long and liquid, and it had edges in it, and he did not understand one syllable, and then her head fell back against the post, and her eyes closed, and the second lid came across and stayed. And Emmett Larke thought about the smart thing. He thought about it clear and cold and fast, the way you think when you are alone 40 kilometers from another human being with a storm coming and something impossible bleeding in your field. The smart thing was to call the district office. Kethran would call the ascendancy liaison, and the liaison would send a flyer, and it would take them 4 hours in this weather, and by then she would be a shape under the snow, and that would not be his fault. That would be weather asterisk, and nobody in the whole cold universe could hold it against him. The smart thing was to walk away. And under that thought, the way bedrock sits under 3 centimeters of frost, was his mother's voice. Rue Larke had said it to him the night they brought his father home. She had said it standing in the kitchen with her hands in the sink and her back to him, because she would not let him see her face, and she had said it in a voice like a plank breaking. "You open the door, Em, whoever it is, whatever they're bringing. You open the door and you sort the rest of it out in the morning. That's the whole job. That's the only part of it that's actually ours." His father had died 3 hours from a doctor. 3 hours. There was a road, and the road had been closed, and there was a man in Bell Hollow who had a flyer and did not fly it, and Del Larke had gone into the ground on a Thursday, and every single person in that kitchen had understood exactly what the arithmetic of a closed door was worth. Emmett stood up. "Right," he said. He got her arm over his shoulders. She was enormously heavy and enormously cold, and when he lifted, she made a sound he would hear for the rest of his life, a sound with no dignity left in it at all, and he said, I know, I'm sorry," and he lifted anyway. 200 meters of frozen row. It took him 11 minutes, and by the end his lungs were full of glass and there were black flowers opening at the edges of his sight, and Scupper was running back and forth in front of them, barking now, barking finally, barking her fool head off at the sky. The front hit while he was 50 meters out. It came over the ridge and struck the vines all at once, and the whole 6 kilometers of trellis screamed like a wire being drawn, and the light went, just went, and the snow came in sideways and dry as sand, and he could not see the house. He kept walking toward where the house was. He walked into his own doorpost hard enough to open his eyebrow. And then the latch was in his hand, and the door came open, and the warm came out at them like something alive, and he got her over the threshold, and the wind took the door and slammed it shut behind them so hard the whole house rang. He put her on the floor by the stove, which was where they put lambing ewes and orphan calves, and once a man with a broken back. It was warm and it was flat and it would do. Then he stood there dripping and bleeding into his own eye and looked at what he had done. There was a Kethran soldier on his kitchen floor. The storm hit the house in waves, and the house did what it always did, which was hunch. Scupper lay down 2 meters from the alien with her chin on her paws and her eyes wide open, and did not move again for 6 hours. Emmett got the med box. It was the standard homestead kit, made for humans, full of things that might be useless or might be poison, and he knelt down and looked at the wound in her side and understood immediately that everything in the box was a joke. She had been shot. Something had gone in below her ribs and taken a long strip of her out with it and cauterized about half of what it touched, which was the only reason she was not already empty. It was a clean, evil, professional-looking wound, made by something that cost more money than his family had ever seen at one time. Nothing about it was an accident. Somebody had shot her, and she had run a long way, because there was nothing within 100 kilometers of the Coldshelf but rock and vines and larks. He could call Kethran right now. He looked at the wall unit. It sat there in its bracket, quiet, patient, the little green light of a working link that would connect him to the district, and the district to the liaison, and the liaison to whoever had put that hole in her. He looked back down. Her eyes were open. She had been watching him look at the wall unit. She was not begging. That was the thing. There was nothing on that gray, ruined face that was asking him for anything. She had simply come back up from wherever she had gone, and she had found herself in a warm room with a human standing over her, and she had turned her head to see which way it was going to be, and she was waiting to find out with an expression of absolutely flat, exhausted, ready calm. She had already decided how it would go. He could see the decision sitting there. She thought he was going to make the call. "No," Emmett said. He didn't know if she understood. He said it anyway. He walked over to the wall unit, and he pulled the link jack out of the back of it, and he set the jack down on the shelf. Then he came back and knelt beside her and said, "Okay, this is going to be bad and I'm sorry and I don't have anything better." He washed the wound with clean water. He packed it with sterile wadding and taped the wadding down with the wide gray tape they used on the vine sheds, because the medical tape was too small. He put 4 blankets on her and 2 coats, and then took the good one, his father's canvas storm coat, and put that on her too. He built the stove up until the top plate glowed. And when she began to shake, the deep, grinding shake of a body coming back from the edge and hating every centimeter of the trip, he sat down on the floor beside her, with his back against the stove's brick shoulder, and he stayed there. At some point he tore a heel off the loaf and dipped it in warm water and held it out. She looked at it for a long time. Then she took it. Her fingers were 4 and very long, and they closed on the bread with a delicacy that was almost unbearable, and she ate it. And Emmett got up and got the rest of the loaf and the crock of butter and the jug, and set them all down beside her within reach. Fire, water, roof. He did not know then that those 3 words were a law, that there was an ancient, half-forgotten body of Kethran custom with a name for the exact arrangement of a fire that has been shared, a cup that has been given, and a roof that has been opened. He did not know the word for it was ***, the covered fire, or that it had not been formally invoked in 311 years. He was 19, he was cold, his eyebrow hurt. He just gave her the bread because she was hungry. And here is the thing that mattered most, the thing that everything after would hang from like a coat from a nail. He did not ask her a single question. Not who she was, not what she had done. Not who had shot her, or why she had come down the shelf, or whether the thing bleeding on his floor was a criminal or a soldier or a queen. He had 100 questions, and he swallowed every one of them, because his mother had taught him that a person who has just been carried in out of a storm has nothing left to spend, and that asking them to spend it is a kind of theft. You open the door, you sort it out in the morning. So Emmett Larke sat on his kitchen floor with his back to the stove, and a dog on one side and an alien on the other. And outside the storm came down the Coldshelf like the end of the world, and he asked her nothing at all. The clock over the door said 1841. In 3 hours, there would be an army on his ridge. She slept for 90 minutes, and Emmett spent every one of them not sleeping. He cleaned up because it was what his hands wanted to do. He mopped the meltwater and the copper off the flagstones. He hung the wet coats. He put a stitch in his own eyebrow with the mirror propped against the flour tin, did a bad job of it, and did not care. He did not put the link jack back in the wall unit. Every so often he stood over her and watched the blankets rise and fall, and the fact kept arriving fresh, like a wave. There was a person from another star lying on his kitchen floor, and he had carried her there himself. At 20:12 she woke up all at once. There was no drowsy part to it. Her eyes came open, and her hand came out from under the blankets with the knife in it, and Emmett, 3 steps away with a pan of water, dropped the pan. It was 30 centimeters of something that was not steel, and the edge of it caught the stove light and did an unpleasant thing with it, and the point of it was steady in the air between them, despite the fact that she was shaking so hard the blankets rustled. Emmett stood in the spreading water with his hands up. "That's fair," he said. "If I were you, I'd have the knife out too." The knife did not move. Emmett very carefully, very slowly, crouched down and picked up the pan. He set it on the stove. He got a cloth and got down on his knees, still well inside her reach, and began wiping the water off the floor with his eyes down. He did the whole spill, and then a bit of floor that was already clean, because some animal part of his brain had worked out that a person on their knees with a rag is the least threatening object in the known universe. When he finally looked up, the knife had come down. She was propped on one elbow, the blankets fallen off her shoulder, and he could see the sheer architecture of her, the long ridged collarbone, the hard cord of muscle in her forearm, the wound packed with gray tape. She was looking at the door. She was working out whether she could make it. "You can't," Emmett said. "Sorry, there's nothing out there. Nearest anything is Bell Hollow, 40 clicks, Kettering's 90 in this." He shook his head. "You get maybe a kilometer. And you got here on empty already, so honestly less." She said something, sharp-clipped, interrogative. "I don't understand you," he said. "I'm sorry, I don't have a translator. There's one in Kettering at the assay office, but there's nobody out here to talk to." She looked at him for a long moment, and then, laboriously, like someone lifting a stone out of deep water, she said, "K-T-T, Airing." "Kettering," Emmett said. His heart went sideways. "Yes, yeah, Kettering." She closed her eyes. Her lips moved, and when they opened again, something behind them had changed gear. "You," she said. The word was thick and strange in her mouth, the vowels laid on wrong, but it was a word. "You speak slow. You speak human." "Slow asterisk," she said with feeling. "Right. Sorry," he sat back on his heels. "I'm Emmett Larke. This is my house, that's my dog," he pointed. Scupper thumped her tail once and did not otherwise commit. "You're on the Coldshelf, human holding. I found you in row 19. You were about 4 minutes from freezing. I brought you in." She absorbed this piece by piece, and he watched something in her face that had been braced very hard for something else begin, slowly, to not know what to do. "Why?" she said. Emmett opened his mouth, and he found that he did not have an answer that would survive being said out loud. That she had been cold was true and stupid. That his mother had told him to was true and would take an hour to explain. That his father had died 3 hours from a doctor, and that he had never once in his life been able to walk past anything, was true, and he was not going to say it to a stranger. So he shrugged, and he said the only thing left. "Because you were there." She stared at him. Then she laughed. It was a terrible sound, a wet, cracked, involuntary bark of a laugh, and it clearly hurt her enormously, because she immediately made a much worse sound and pressed her hand flat over the gray tape and put her forehead against the floor. "Whoa, hey, don't." "You were there," she wheezed into the flagstones. "You were asterisk there, asterisk. That is very good, human. That is the best thing I have heard in 9 days." She lay like that for a while, breathing. Then she rolled onto her back and looked up at the smoke-blackened beams of the Larke kitchen and said, in a completely different voice, a level, formal, ruined voice, "My name is Aravitel Somoth." "Okay," said Emmett. "That means nothing to you." "No." "Good," she said and closed her eyes. "Then for 1 more hour I am simply a woman on a floor." Her name, she said, was Aravi, and she preferred they, and she had learned human speech the way officers of her house learned things, which was badly and out of a book and under protest. She would not say where she had come from. She would not say who had shot her. Emmett did not ask. He fed her instead. She ate 3/4 of a loaf and most of a jar of preserved shelf plum and the entire cold end of the roast, and every time he set something within reach she looked at it, and then at him with an expression that got harder to read the more food he put down, not easier. "How bad is it?" Emmett said, nodding at the tape. "You did well," she said. "You did badly, but you did well. The wadding will hold. Kethran blood clots when it is warm, it cannot when it is cold. That is why I ran downhill." She let her head fall back. "I did not expect to find a fire at the bottom. There's fires all over the shelf. There's homesteads every 40 clicks. There is no fire anywhere in this system that would have opened for me tonight," she said, "except this one. And that is not because your people are good. It is because your people did not know who I was." Emmett looked at her. "So who are you?" he said, and then immediately, "Sorry, forget it, that was." "No," she turned her head. Those pale slotted eyes came around and fixed on him, and Emmett felt them like a weight on his chest. "No, you have earned it, and I have been sitting here in your kindness for 1 hour trying to decide whether to spend it, and I have decided. Listen to me now, human. Listen carefully, and then get up and go into your other room and take your dog with you and shut the door, and I will be gone before your storm ends, and you will never." The lights went out. Not the storm. Emmett knew what the storm did to the lights, and this was not it. The lamps did not flicker and gutter. They simply stopped, all at once, and the stove fan stopped, and the low hum of the pump house across the yard that Emmett had heard every night of his life stopped, and the silence that fell into the room was so total that he could hear the snow ticking on the window like fingernails. And then every light in the house came back on at maximum, and the wall unit lit up, and the little screen in the corner of the kitchen that had shown nothing but market prices and weather for 11 years lit up too, and a face filled it. A Kethran face. Male, older, gray as gunmetal, with the double gold bar of a marshal laid across his throat and a scar that took the corner of his mouth up into a permanent, weary half-smile. He spoke, and the screen wrote his words underneath in human script, and he spoke slowly, and he spoke with the patience of a man who has all night. "To the holders of the Coldshelf," said the face, "to every hearth, every station, every relay, and every soul under this sky. This is Corvan Kethra, Lord Marshal of the Ninth Host. I speak with the authority of the Ascendancy and by the treaty that gives you your ground." Emmett did not move. He could not. "9 days ago," said the face, "Reneth Tel Sameth, the voice of the Ascendancy, was murdered in his own hall." Beside the stove, Vey had gone absolutely still. "He was killed by his daughter." The screen changed. It showed her. It showed a Kethran woman in gray and gold on some high-polished floor, and she was straight-backed and hard-faced, and she was unmistakably, obviously, undeniably the woman lying on Emmett Larke's kitchen tiles with 4 blankets, and his father's coat on her and a hole in her side. Aravai Tel Sameth, Kinslayer, Voice Slayer. She fled the Hall of Ash. She fled the coordinate Vantal. 6 hours ago her craft went down in the north of your world, and she is walking toward you. The face came back. It looked out of the screen with those flat coin eyes, and it looked, Emmett would swear, directly at him. "She will come to your door. She will be hurt, and she will be pitiful, and she will lie to you because that is what she is. Do not open to her. Do not feed her. Do not warm her. Put her out into the cold. Call this frequency and stand away from the door, and no harm of any kind will come to you or yours, and there will be a payment made that will change your family's life." The half-smile did not move. "And if you keep her," said Corvan Kethra, "understand what you are keeping. This is not a threat, farmers. This is a courtesy. I am telling you what the sky will do." The screen went black. The lights went out. Then they came back on, normally, dimly, the way they always were. The clock over the door said 21:12. Emmett Larke stood in the middle of his kitchen for a long, long moment. He was aware of the stove ticking, and of Scupper's head up now, ears forward. He was aware of the wall unit and the jack sitting on the shelf beside it, and how long it would take to push the jack back in 2 seconds, and how long to say the words "she's here." 1. He was aware that he was 19, and that his mother and his little brother were 2 days away in Kethran, and that this holding was everything the Larks had ever managed to make in this universe, and that a man with an army had just offered to change their life. He was aware that the woman on his floor had killed her own father. He turned around. Vey had gotten herself up onto one elbow. She had the knife, and she had turned it around, and she was holding it out to him, hilt first, across the flat of her open hand. "Take it," she said. "What?" "Take it." Her arm was shaking. "You cannot fight me, and I will not make you try. Take the blade and put the jack in the wall and say the words, and they will come, and they will take me, and they will pay you, and you will have done nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand me? There is no version of this where a boy on a farm is *wrong for doing what an empire told him to do." Her lips pulled back. "Take it. I am so tired, human. Take the blade." Emmett looked at the knife. He looked at her face. And what he saw was not the face on the screen. The face on the screen had been a still frame, a hard woman on a polished floor, flattened and lit, and edited into a shape that meant *guilty*. This was a person who had not slept in 9 days, who had crawled uphill through frozen vines with a hole in her, who had reached for a blade she could not lift, who had laughed at a stupid joke about a row of stormvine, and who was now trying, with the last thing she had, to make sure the boy who had fed her did not get hurt. "Did you do it?" Emmett said. She went very still. "That is the question everyone asks," she said. Everyone. And it does not matter what I answer, because the answer of a kinslayer is worth nothing. That is the entire asterisk point of accusing someone of. I didn't ask everyone, said Emmett Larke. I asked you. The wind hit the house hunched. And Aravitel Sameth, who had not been asked a single question in 9 days by anyone who was willing to hear the answer, looked up at a human boy in a wet shirt with a badly stitched eyebrow, and her mouth came open, and nothing came out, and then something did. No, she said. Okay, said Emmett. He took the knife. He turned it around, and he put it back in her hand and closed her fingers on it and pushed her hand down onto the blankets. Then you'll want that, he said. He walked to the shelf and picked up the link jack and looked at it. Then he opened the stove and threw it in. It hissed, it curled, it went. Boy, Vay whispered, boy, what have you done? I've had a really long day, said Emmett, and I'm going to make tea. He got about 4 steps. Then Scupper stood up. She came up off the floor with her legs stiff and every hair on her spine standing, and she stared at the west wall of the kitchen, and she began, low in her chest, to growl. Emmett stopped. He heard it a half-second later, under the storm, under the wind, under everything, a note that did not belong on the Coldshelf. A deep, layered, descending hum felt more than heard, coming down through the roof and the turf and the poured stone and up through the soles of his boots. Engines. A lot of engines. He went to the window. He rubbed the frost with the heel of his hand. The storm was breaking. It always did up here. The front came through hard and fast, and then the sky opened behind it like a door. And through the last shredding curtains of snow, the ridge above his holding was lighting up. Not with one light, with hundreds. They came over the shoulder of the 9 sisters in a line, and then in 3 lines, and then in a shape that had no name because it was not a shape. It was a asterisk tide. Landing lights and running lights in the hot red bellies of Dropcraft, the cold blue of Walker eyes, the moving spark string of 10,000 helmet lamps coming down the shelf in perfect order. Down the north face, around the east rows, along the pond, up the west ridge. They did not hurry, and they did not fire, and they did not stop. They came until they had gone all the way around, until the Larke homestead, 1 house, 1 barn, 1 shed, 1 mast, 1 dog, sat in the exact center of a ring of light 6 kilometers across. Emmett Larke stood at the window of his kitchen with a cup in his hand, and watched an army encircle his father's farm. The clock over the door said 21:41. It had been 3 hours since he opened the door. Vay got up. She should not have been able to. Emmett heard the blankets go and turned, and she was on her feet, one hand braced on the table, swaying, gray and terrible in the lamplight with his father's coat hanging off one shoulder, looking past him at the ring of lights. The 9th, she said, her voice had no color in it, all of it. He brought all of it. How many is all of it? 6,000 line, 200 armor. The 9th host does not do smaller, she laughed, that terrible wet bark. For one woman with a hole in her. He has brought 6,000 soldiers to a asterisk farm asterisk. Why hasn't he shot us? The question sat in the room. It was the only thing Emmett could not make fit. Because that was what an empire asterisk did asterisk. 1 house, 1 hole in the ground, 1 flash from orbit, and a story on the district feed about a gas main. Corvin Kethran had 6,000 soldiers and a fleet in the sky, and he had said asterisk, I am telling you what the sky will do asterisk, and the sky had done nothing except surround a stormvine farm and sit there with its lights on. They turned around very slowly. Say that again, she said. Why hasn't he shot us? He's had, I don't know, he's known for at least 10 minutes. There's nothing in this house but a slug gun and an old harvester. He could. Boy, she had gone rigid. What did you give me? What? What did you give me? She came off the table 1 step and had to catch herself on a chair, and her eyes were enormous. When I came in, before I woke, What did you give me exactly? In what order? Say it. Emmett stared at her. I put you by the fire, he said. I gave you water, warm water in the tin cup, it's there, and bread. And then I put the rest of the food down beside you, and I put the coat on you. The fire, she said, the cup. The roof. Yeah. And I ate the bread. You ate most of the kitchen. Aravitel Sameth put her hand over her mouth. Emmett had seen a lot of expressions on her face in the last 3 hours, and most of them had been variations on the theme of a person deciding how to die. He had not seen this one. This one was something coming apart. This one was a woman standing in a stranger's kitchen 40 light years from her father's grave, discovering that a 19-year-old with a mop had accidentally handed her the only weapon in the system that could actually hurt Corvin Kethran. Ashid*, she whispered. She made him sit down. She sat opposite him with both hands flat on the table, and outside the ring of lights sat quietly in the snow and did not move, and she told him what he had done. There is a law, she said, older than the ascendancy, older than ships when we were nothing but herders on a cold plain and we were human. Whatever the assay office tells you, the plane would kill you if you were caught out. So there was a law. If a traveler reaches a fire and the holder of that fire gives him the fire and water and the roof, then the traveler is **, covered, under the covered fire. Meaning what? Meaning nothing may take him from that fire, Vey said. Not his enemy, not his kin, not his lord, not the law itself, not for murder, not for treason, not for anything a person can do. The hearth is not a * hiding place *, boy, it does not say he is innocent. It says only that he is not to be taken by force from that fire. He may be summoned, he may be tried, but he must walk out on his own feet. Her jaw worked. And to break a hearth, to go through that door with a blade, is the crime with no bottom. It is not a fine, it is not a prison. The house that does it is unmade. Its name is struck. Its dead are dug up and buried outside the wall. Every Kethran alive knows this in their bones, the way you know not to eat your own hands. And you're telling me, Emmett said slowly, that I accidentally did the magic words. They are not * magic words, they are the oldest law of my. She stopped. She pressed her fingers to her eyes. Yes. You accidentally did the magic words. So they can't come in. They cannot come in. Then we're fine. We are not remotely fine, said Vey, because the law applies to a Kethran hearth. And there it was. She explained it flatly, because there was no kind way. The Ashit was a covenant between a hearth of the ascendancy and a traveler. Human beings were not Kethran. This house was not a Kethran house. Emmett Larke was not a hearth holder in any register any Kethran court had ever kept. All Corvin Kethran had to do was establish, on the record in front of the host, that the covered fire had never been lit, that a boy on a farm cannot cover a fire any more than a dog can, and then he could walk in and take her out by the hair, and every soldier watching would consider it lawful and clean and done. That is why he has not fired, she said. He cannot * fire until the question is settled, because if he fires and the fire was * covered, he is unmade, not punished, unmade. The 9th host would take his head themselves before the ash cooled, so he must ask the question first, in the open, properly, and he must get the answer he wants. And who answers the question? The herald, she said. There is always a herald. He will be coming down the hill right now. They came at 22:06. Emmett watched from the window. A walker, a squad, and between them a thin figure in white that walked with its hands folded. They stopped 100 meters out, at the head of the lane, at the point where the Larke fence began. They did not cross it. They can't, Vey said at his shoulder. Not until it is answered. He is being careful, and he is being careful because he is afraid. Of me. Of the question boy. She looked down at him. Now listen, because you are about to walk out there, and I cannot walk with you, and you will have perhaps 6 minutes to not die. You could just. If I go out, the fire is uncovered and he takes me and he kills me on the road and the truth dies in the snow with me. And then in 1 year he puts a puppet in the chair of the voice, and in 5 years he does to your Coldshelf what he did to the Ganeth Reaches, which is to say he empties it. So no, I will not just. Her hand came down on his shoulder. Her fingers were very cold and very strong. You will go out. You will not step past your own fence. You will not touch him. You will not shout. Shouting is what an animal does before it runs, and he will use it. You will be still and slow, and you will say the words. What words? HFY, said Vey. The fire is covered. That is all. You do not argue. You do not explain. You are not a lawyer, and you will lose to him in 3 sentences, so do not try. Make the claim and make him disprove it in front of the herald in front of 6,000 men. Claim and stand and shut your mouth. Emmett put on his father's coat. It was still warm from her. At the door, with his hand on the latch and his heart going like a hammer in a bucket, he stopped. Vey. Yes. You didn't tell me what happened. There was a silence. He came to my father's hall, she said, with 60 men, and asked for the voice's consent to put a boy of his own blood in the ascendancy's chair, and my father said no. And Kethran Kethran took my father's own blade off my father's own wall and did it himself, and then he put the blade in my hands while my father was still dying on the floor, and he stepped back, and let his men come in and see me holding it. Her voice did not change at all. It took 11 seconds. I have watched it 300 times. You watched it. There is a lamp in the hall, said HFY. A hearthglass. It has burned in the hall of ash for 900 years, and it remembers every night it has ever burned. He did not know. He is a soldier. He thinks a hall is a room. She reached into the split of her armor under the gray tape and brought out something small, a shard of dark glass, no bigger than a plumb stone, wrapped in a scrap of her own bloodied undercloth. Deep inside it something moved slow, like a face turning over in dark water. 9 days I have carried my father's death in my hand, she said, trying to reach a channel he cannot switch off. Every cord is his, every relay is his, every band in the ascendancy runs through his signal houses. So I ran for the one place in this system where the transmitters are not his. I ran for your people. I ran for Kethran. Her mouth twisted, and I fell down in a field of vines 11 kilometers short. Emmett looked at the shard. Then he opened the door and went out into the snow. The cold took him like a slap. The sky had cleared behind the front, and the stars over the Coldshelf were savage and enormous, and the ring of lights on the hills threw his shadow forward down the lane. He walked to his own fence and stopped. The herald came forward thin, white-robed, his skin a paler gray than Vey's, almost silver, and his eyes bound. Not blindfolded. Bound with a band of dark metal that crossed them entirely, and Emmett understood in a lurch of superstitious horror that the herald could not see him and did not need to. Behind the herald, a walker crouched with its cannon idling. And behind the walker, on the frozen ruts of the lane, stood Lord Marshal Kethran Kethran in a gray greatcoat, hands behind his back, with the weary half-smile on his ruined mouth. Human, said the herald. His human speech was flawless and toneless. You are Emmett Larke, holder of Registry 614, Coldshelf North. Yes. The Lord Marshal of the 9th Host requires the person of HFY. She is in your house. You will bring her out and set her upon the road, and you will step back 3 paces, and this will be finished. Emmett's mouth was so dry he had to work it twice. Claim and stand and shut your mouth. HFY, he said. The wind blew. Nobody moved. Not one soldier on that whole ring of hills moved, and Emmett, standing at his own fence in his dead father's coat, understood that the silence he was hearing was 6,000 people all deciding at once to hold still. The herald's head tilted. Say it again, he said, and for the first time there was something in his voice. HFY asterisk. Emmett's breath went up white. She came to my fire, I gave her the fire, I gave her water in my own cup, I opened my roof to her, she ate my bread on my floor. That's the thing, right? That's the 4 things. I did the 4 things, so the fire is covered. Down the lane, Kethran Kethran began to laugh. It was a genuinely warm sound. That was the horror of it. He laughed like a man at a table, and he came walking up the frozen lane past his own walker with his hands still behind his back, and he stopped beside the herald and looked at Emmett over the fence with real, unforced affection. "Boy," he said, in accented but easy human speech, "who told you that word?" Emmett said nothing. "She did, of course she did." Kethran shook his head, still smiling. "It is an old word, older than my language, a word for herders and a cold plain and a fire of dung and grass, and it is beautiful, and I honor it, and it has nothing to do with you. Ashet is a covenant of the hearths of the ascendancy, a thing between houses. You are not a house, boy, you are a licensee, you have an asterisk registry number. Your family sits on that shelf of rock because 40 years ago a clerk of my people signed a paper letting you sit there, and a fire lit by a licensee on borrowed dirt is not a covered fire. It is an asterisk cooking fire." The smile stayed. The eyes did not. "Now, it is very cold and you have done nothing wrong yet, and I will say this only once more. Bring her out." And Emmett Larke, 19 years old, standing in front of 6,000 soldiers with his hands shaking so hard he had to fist them in his pockets, heard himself say, "Ask the herald." Kethran stopped smiling. "What?" "You keep telling asterisk me asterisk," Emmett said. His voice cracked in the middle and he kept going anyway. "You've said it 3 times. You're standing in my lane with an army explaining to a farm kid why the law doesn't apply. Why?" He swallowed. "Why do you even care what I think? I'm a licensee, just come and take her." The lane was very quiet. "You can't," said Emmett, "can you?" The herald turned his blind-bound face toward the marshal and waited, and the waiting had a terrible patience in it. "Ask him," said Emmett. "Ask him the question. Is my house a hearth of the ascendancy, yes or no? He has to answer true. That's what he's asterisk for, isn't it? That's why he's got his eyes covered, so he can't be shown things, so all he's got is the law. So ask him." And when Kethran Kethran did not speak, when the Lord Marshal of the Ninth Host stood in a frozen rut in a stormvine lane and did not open his mouth, Emmett Larke reached out and put his bare hand on his own doorpost gate, on the little enamel plate that had been screwed there before he was born, that his father had polished every spring, that had a serial number and a date and a paragraph of Kethran script that nobody in the family had ever been able to read. "Then I'll ask him," he said. "Herald, what does it say on my gate?" The herald walked forward. He crossed the fence line. He was permitted. A herald was permitted anywhere, and he came up to the gatepost, and he laid 4 long silver fingers on the enamel plate and read it with his hands. Nobody breathed. "It is a grant of settlement," said the herald, "issued by the Colonial Office of the Ascendancy in the year of the 4th Accord." "Read the words," said Emmett, "the actual words." The herald read, "To the family Larke and to their line is granted the keeping of fire and threshold upon this ground, in the manner and with the burdens of a house of the ascendancy, so long as the fire is kept." The silence that followed had weight. Emmett did not understand what he had just heard. He knew only that beside him, on the other side of the fence, Kethran Kethran had gone the color of ash. "Herald," the marshal said, his voice had changed. "That is a asterisk form asterisk, boilerplate. A phrase some clerk chose, because there was no other category in the—" "The wording," said the herald, "is the wording. It is a asterisk conveyancing formula." "Wording is the wording, Lord Marshal." The blind head turned, unhurried, taking in the fence, the lane, the walker, the 6,000 lights on the hills. The ascendancy granted this ground the keeping of fire and threshold in the manner of a house. The ascendancy said the words, not the boy. He folded his hands. It is a hearth. It has always been a hearth. Every human holding on this world with a plate on its gate is a hearth of the ascendancy, and has been for 40 years, and no one thought to look. He turned his bound eyes on Emmett. HFY, said the herald of the ninth host. The fire is covered. Emmett Larke walked back up his own lane on legs that did not entirely belong to him. He got the door open. He got it shut. He got 3 steps into the kitchen, and then his knees went, and he sat down hard on the flagstones with his back to the door and put his head between them, and breathed like a man who had been held underwater. I heard, said Vay. There's an army, Emmett said, into his knees. There's an army in the pond field. Yes. I told a marshal to shut up. You did not tell him to shut up. You asked him a question. Vay lowered herself to the floor beside him slowly, with a grunt of pain. You asked the only question in the universe he could not answer. Do you understand what you did out there? Do you have the faintest idea? No. Neither do they, she said. That is why they have all gone very quiet. The night settled into something that had no name. They did not attack. They did not leave. The ring of lights sat on the hills, and the walkers idled with their blue eyes on the house, and dropcraft came and went from the ridge with a sound like tearing cloth, and nothing whatsoever happened. Emmett made tea. It was the stupidest thing he had ever done, and he did it anyway, because his hands needed a job. Vay drank it, and made a face, and drank more of it. He will not go, she said. Understand him. Corvin is not a monster from a story. He is a very tired, very competent man who has decided the ascendancy is dying and only he can save it, and every single thing he has done, the hall, my father, the 60 men, he did, while believing he was the last responsible adult in the galaxy. She turned the cup in her long fingers. That kind of man does not stop. He rearranges asterisk. Into what? Into a version where he never broke the hearth. She looked at him. Boy, what ends the ashet? You walking out, he said. And the fire going out. And he didn't want to say it. Say it, said Vay. The host dying, said Emmett. The host dying. She set the cup down. There is no covered fire without a hearth holder. If Emmett Larke is dead, there is only a house with a corpse in it and a fugitive inside, and no law in the ascendancy has anything to say about what he does next. Her jaw set. He cannot send the ninth. 6,000 men saw the herald speak, but a marshal has other men. Like what? Like men with no house colors on their coats, said Vay, who came down the shelf in the storm 2 hours ago, and have been lying in your vine rows ever since, waiting for the lights in your house to go out. Emmett went to the window. He looked out at his own black rose, and the snow lying long and blue and untouched under the star glare, and the fence, and the shed, and the mast standing over all of it like a needle. And he thought about the fact that Scupper had not sat down for 40 minutes. They came at 01:20. Emmett had been ready since 23:00, and it did not help at all. He had done what he could. He had killed the lights in the front rooms and left them burning in the back, so the house looked half asleep. He had put both bars across the door and wedged the storm shutters. He had loaded the slug gun and put the spare shells in his left coat pocket, because his right hand would be on the gun. He had walked Pillar out of the barn in the dark, on manual, and left it crouched in the shadow of the west wall like a sleeping thing. Vay had cut a strip off a blanket and lashed her own wound tighter and said, when Emmett protested, I have fought with worse. And when he protested again, boy, if I lie on the floor while they cut your throat, you will have died for a woman who lay on the floor. Give me the room. They took the pump house first. Emmett knew because the pump stopped. Then the whole house went dark, and the stove glow was the only thing left, and Scupper began to scream. That was the only word for it. It was not a bark. It was a high, ragged shriek of pure animal warning, and something hit the shutter of the north window with a sound like a hammer on a drum. "Down," Vay said. The shutter blew in. It came off its hinges and across the kitchen and took the table with it, and a canister came through the hole and hit the far wall and started screaming out white gas, and Emmett's eyes went to acid instantly, and through the ringing and the burning he heard boots on the flagstones, 2 sets, 3, and something in Kethran said very fast and very low. Then he heard a wet sound, and a body hit his kitchen floor. Vay had not been where they thought she was. She had been standing flat against the wall beside the broken window in the dark, in a stranger's coat, with a knife, and she had let the first one come all the way in. The second one turned and fired. The muzzle flash lit the whole room like a photograph. Emmett saw it in a single frozen frame forever. The shattered table, the gas boiling white along the ceiling, Scupper crouched under the bench with her lips off her teeth, and Aravitel Sameth in mid-motion, low, her white hair swinging, going asterisk toward asterisk the gun. The bolt took her in the shoulder, it spun her. Emmett did not decide to move, his body did it. He came up off the floor with the slug gun and he did not aim, because there was no time and because at 4 meters you did not need to, and he pulled the trigger, and the old gun kicked him in the collarbone like a shod horse, and the man in the doorway of his kitchen went backward through it and did not get up. The third one got Emmett around the throat from behind. He got a forearm under Emmett's jaw and lifted, and Emmett's boots came off the floor, and his vision went red at the corners, and he could hear the man breathing calmly in his ear, and he understood with terrible clarity that he was about to die on his own kitchen floor, and that it was going to take about 11 more seconds. He dropped the gun, he got his hand into his left pocket, and he took the spare shells out and jammed them, all 4 of them, brass first, into the man's eye. The arm came loose. Emmett fell and rolled and came up with the stove poker because it was the nearest thing that was not a memory. And then Vay was there, Vay with one arm hanging dead and her side soaked black and her teeth bared, and she went past him low and fast and did something to the big soldier's knee and something else to his throat, and he folded up onto the tiles and lay still. Emmett stood in the wreck of his mother's kitchen, with white gas curling along the ceiling and snow blowing in through the ruined window and 3 armed men on the floor, and he heard himself make a sound that was not crying and was not laughing. "Boy," Vay had a hand on the wall, she was going down. "Boy, fire." "What?" The asterisk fire. She jerked her chin at the stove. The blast had blown the door off it. There were coals scattered across the flagstones, dying, blackening, going gray. The ash it holds while the fire burns. That is the law, if that fire goes out. Emmett was already on his knees. He shoveled the coals back with his bare hands. He would not remember doing it. He would find the burns 3 days later and be unable to account for them. He got the coals in and the door back on its hinges and the draft open, and he fed it kindling and vine stalk and blew on it until his head swam, and sat back on his heels and watched a small yellow flame stand up out of the ash. He was still watching it when he heard the walkers move. They had come to the fence. Not across it, to it. Along the whole eastern line, the 9th host had come down off the hills and formed on the fence, rank on rank, in silence, close enough that Emmett could see individual faces in the light of the burning pump house. And they were not looking at the house. They were looking at Corvin Kethran, who was walking up the lane alone with his hands behind his back, and who stopped where the herald had stopped, and who looked at the 3 bodies being carried out of the Larke kitchen door and laid in the snow by his own men. "Bandits," said the marshal loudly into the cold. "Coldshelf raiders, human criminals, a tragedy. The host will of course assist in the—" And out of the dark, from the front rank of the 9th host, one voice said, "They are wearing Ganeth pattern boots." It was not shouted. It was said, flatly, the way a soldier says a thing he has been trained his entire life to say when he sees it, and the words went down the ranks like a crack going through ice. Emmett, standing in his own broken doorway with a slug gun and blood on his shirt and a dog against his leg, watched an army begin, very quietly, to think. Kethran Kethran looked at the house for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back up the lane, and the ranks parted for him and closed behind him, and did not follow immediately. He has until dawn, Vay said. She was on the floor again. He had gotten her back onto the blankets and gotten the tape onto her shoulder, and there had been a great deal of copper, and she was gray in a way that frightened him badly. Why dawn? Because the Herald has already sent word up. There is a Herald's report going to the chair right now, and it says the hearth was covered and 3 men came through the door in the night without colors. She coughed. That report will be read in the Hall of Ash in 9 hours, and Kethran will have exactly one story, and it will be, the human boy went mad, the human boy attacked us, the human boy is dead, the kinslayer is dead, everything is very sad. Her eyes came open. The only thing that can beat that story is a better story, a true one. Loud enough that it is heard before his gets there. The shard, she agreed, which needs a transmitter, which needs power, which needs a channel that his signal houses do not own. She let her head fall back. You have a market dish on your barn, boy, and I love you for it, and it is a toy 200 watts. It talks to a repeater in Bell Hollow that talks to a relay in Kethran that Kethran's people took offline 4 hours before I ever reach your field because he is not stupid. That is his cordon. That is what he came here to hold. Emmett stood up. He walked to the ruined window and looked out, past the fence, past the ranks, past the burning pump house and the frozen catch pond, at the black lattice needle standing over his farm against the savage stars. Vay, he said, what's the widest you can transmit on? You are not listening, the dish is. Not the dish. He turned around. The dish is the mouth . I don't need a bigger mouth, I need a bigger lung . He was talking fast now, and something in his chest had come loose and was flying. There are 11 capacitor cans in that shed. They've been drinking off that mast for 3 weeks, and that front tonight was the biggest thing off the sisters in 2 years, and they are full . They're past full. I've got 2 on the bypass because they were over spec. That's Vay. That's enough charge to run this farm for a season. Her eyes had opened all the way. You want to put a season of stored lightning, she said slowly, through a 200-watt market transmitter. Yes. It will destroy it. Yes. It will destroy it in what, 2 seconds? No. Emmett dragged the flour tin across the floor and knelt and started drawing on the flagstones with a burnt stick, and his hands were steady for the first time all night. No, listen, you don't dump it. If you dump it, you get a bang and a hole in the ground. You bleed it. You run it through the mast's own step-down, and you feed it into the transmitter through the pump inverters, all 4 of them in series, and they'll absolutely cook. But they'll cook slow, they'll cook for 60 seconds. 90. And the whole time the dish is screaming. Screaming what? Everything. He looked up at her. That's the point. It won't be a clean signal. It'll be filth, a 200-watt dish being force-fed a lightning storm spraying across every band there is. Market band, weather band, emergency band, military band. All of them at once, dirty as hell and loud as the sky. He put the stick down. Nobody can jam it because it's not on a channel, it's on all of them. Nobody can take it offline because it isn't going through anything of theirs. It'll go out to every homestead on the shelf, and every relay buoy in the lane, and every ship in orbit. And every helmet, said Vay. She sat up, all the way up on a shattered shoulder, and her face came alive in a way that made her, for one moment, look exactly like the woman on the polished floor in the propaganda still, hard and highborn and entirely lethal. "Every helmet," she said again. 6,000 men on your fence on cordon watch, listening on a low band for orders, and they cannot switch it off without going deaf." Her teeth showed. "Boy, if you turn that mast on, 6,000 soldiers of the Ninth Host will hear my father die inside their own skulls." "Yeah," said Emmett Larke. "And a hearth-glass casting is not a asterisk recording asterisk," Vey said very quietly. "You understand, it is not a picture, it is the room. It is the light and the sound and the smell of the room cast whole. Any Kethran who takes it in his helmet will not asterisk watch my father die. He will asterisk stand in the hall asterisk." She looked at her own hands. "There is not one man out there who will be able to tell himself he did not see it." The stove ticked. Outside on the fence, 6,000 soldiers waited for dawn. "Okay," Emmett said, "so how long do you need?" 11 seconds, said Aravitel Sameth, is what it took him. "Give me 40 and I will end him." Emmett stood up and looked out the window, at the shed, at the mast, at the 200 meters of open snow between his door and the switching gear, lit up like a stage by the lights of an army. "Right," he said, "then I have to get to the shed." The problem with the shed was that it was outside. 200 meters from the kitchen door to the switching shed at the foot of the mast, across open snow, in the full white glare of 100 vehicle lamps, in front of 6,000 soldiers of the Ninth Host. And the moment he crossed his own threshold, he was not a hearth holder standing in a covered fire. He was a 19-year-old boy in a field. "He will not shoot you," Vey said from the floor. "Not with the host watching, not after the boots." "You said he rearranges." "He does." She was quiet a moment. "He will send men to asterisk carry asterisk you back inside, very gently, very publicly. And they will hold you in your own kitchen, politely, until dawn and be extremely correct about it, and it will be over. Then I need him not to see me go. There is nothing between here and that shed." "No," Emmett agreed, "but there's something between him and here." Vey followed his eyes to the thing crouched in the shadow of the west wall. 4 legs, 1 bad hip, a rusted harvester frame with a cab like a cracked eggshell, and a name painted on the flank in his father's terrible handwriting. "That," said Vey, "is a farm machine." "That," said Emmett, "is 4 tons of steel that stands 3 meters tall and can go anywhere on this holding in the dark, because it's been doing it since I was 8. He was already pulling on his gloves. And it makes a noise like the end of the world." Vey began, very slowly, to smile. "You are going to walk your tractor in front of an army. Down the east line, harvest lamps on full, thresher screaming, right along the fence where their whole line is standing. Every man out there is going to turn and look at it because you cannot asterisk not look at it. And while they're looking at that, you will be in the dark on the other side of the barn. I'll be in the dark on the other side of the barn." She held out her good hand. He hauled her up. She swayed, set her jaw, stayed standing. "Give me the gun," she said. "Vey, I will be at this window. I will hold the door of a covered fire, which is the oldest right my people have, and if a man without colors comes through your vines again, I will put him down, and no herald in the ascendancy will say a word against it." She took the slug gun out of his hands. "And boy, when it lights, when the mast lights, I have to be asterisk at asterisk the dish. In the barn, casting. Whatever is left of me has to be standing under that transmitter with the shard in my hand, and my face where the world can see it, because a truth with no one standing behind it is only a rumor. You can barely walk. Then I will not walk far." He started pillar at 03:41. The old harvester came up off its knees with a groan Emmett felt in his teeth, and the cutting head unfolded like a thing waking from a bad dream, and the harvest lamps came on, 8 of them, 1,000 watts each, designed to turn a black winter row into noon, and the whole yard went white. Out on the fence, 6,000 helmets turned. Emmett locked the throttle, set the guideline to the east row, punched the thresher to full, and dropped out of the cab into the snow. Pillar walked away from him. It went down the east line with its lamps blazing and its cutting head roaring and its bad hip clanking like a dropped anvil. 4 tons of ancient agricultural machinery striding along the fence in front of the ninth host, and Emmett heard shouting, real shouting, and the whine of a walker's turret coming around, and he did not look back. He ran, out the north side of the barn on his hands and knees, then low along the wall, then flat out across 40 meters of open ground with his lungs full of knives, and every step of it he waited for the shot. It did not come. He hit the shed door and fell inside and lay in the dark on the cold concrete, listening to an army being distracted by a tractor. Then he got up and went to work. It took him 18 minutes, and every single thing his father had ever taught him. He pulled the 11 capacitor cans out of their standby rack and cross-tied them into a chain that made his mouth taste of metal just to look at. He killed the load bus. He isolated the house, because otherwise the surge would go straight through the kitchen and cook the stove and the wall unit and vase standing in the middle of it. He ran a jumper the length of the shed and up through the conduit to the mast step-down, and he crossed the 4 pump inverters in series and opened their cooling loops all the way, knowing as he did it that all 4 were going to die in under 2 minutes, and that they were 900 credits each, and that his mother was going to kill him. And then he took the feed line, the thin, stupid orange line that ran to the barn, to the market dish, to 200 watts of transmitter that had spent 11 years reporting the price of stormvine fiber to a repeater in Bell Hollow, and wired a lightning storm to it. It was, objectively, the worst thing anyone had ever done to an electrical system. "Dad," he said out loud, "you'd hate this." He put his hand on the master switch. He did not throw it. He went and got Vay first. She was in the barn doorway when he came around the corner, propped against the frame. She had gotten there on her own, and there was a long copper smear on the wall behind her showing exactly what it had cost. Out in the east rows, Pillar had reached the end of the line and turned and was coming back, still bellowing, and its lamps swept across them both like a lighthouse. "They've stopped watching the machine," she said. "They are coming." "I know." He got under her good arm and took her weight and got her the 6 meters to the base of the dish mount and set her down against the strut with the shard in her fist. "How long do you need?" 90 seconds. She was breathing in short, shallow bites. "The shard does the casting. I only have to hold it and let it read me and say who I am and say his name, or it is just a picture of a dead man and any court can call it a fake. So say his name." "Boy," her hand closed on his wrist. "When it lights, get away from the mast. Not near. Not under. That is a farm's whole winter going through a wire the width of your thumb. Get behind the stone." "Vay." "Say you will get behind the stone." "I'll get behind the stone." She let go of his wrist. And then, for 1 second, in the roaring white glare of an oncoming tractor, and the cold blue eyes of 200 walkers, Aravitel Sameth, heir of a burned house, kinslayer to a whole empire, the most hunted woman under that sky, reached up with a shaking gray hand and touched the side of a 19-year-old human's face. "You did not ask me one question," she said. "Not one. In 3 hours. You had every right and you did not ask." "You were cold," said Emmett. "Yes," said Vay, "I was cold." She let her hand fall. "Turn on your lightning, farmer." He got to the shed with soldiers coming through the north fence. He saw the line break and reform and come across his rows at a run, saw a walker step over the fence like a man stepping over a low wall, and he got the door shut and the bar across it and put both hands on the master switch and looked out through the wire glass at his father's farm full of an army. The clock on the shed wall said 0402. It had been 9 hours and 21 minutes since he opened the door. Emmett Larke threw the switch. The mast lit. Not with light, although there was light. A corona standing up off the ring at the top of the tower like a crown of blue hair, and every fence wire on 6 kilometers of trellis singing a single pure note, and the snow lifting off the ground in a fine sheet all across the holding as the charge came out of the earth. It lit with asterisk sound asterisk. Every helmet on the Coldshelf screamed at once. Emmett saw 6,000 soldiers of the 9th Host reel, the whole line stagger, hands going to their heads, a walker slewing and stopping dead with its cannon pointing at nothing, as a 200-watt market transmitter, fed a season of stored storm, tore open every band from the emergency channel to the military lonet, and shouted the same thing on all of them. And what it shouted was a room. Emmett could not receive it. He had no helmet and no shard reader and no Kethran blood. He got only the human edge of it on the little cracked screen of the shed's weather panel, a hall high and dark, a lamp burning in the corner, an old gray man in a long robe standing very straight with his hands folded, 60 soldiers in the doorway, a younger man with a scarred mouth and a weary half-smile speaking reasonably, patiently, the way a man speaks at a table, and the old man saying once quietly, "No." And then the blade coming off the wall. 11 seconds. Emmett counted them. He had not meant to, and he could not stop. And then the blade being pressed into a young woman's hands while her father died at her feet, and the doors opening, and the men coming in to see. Then the hall guttered out, and the casting turned, and gave the sky what it had been given last. A barn, a strut, a dying woman propped against it in a dead man's coat, gray and copper and burning-eyed, holding a piece of glass up into the light of a farm. She said her name. She said her father's name. And then HFY Telsomoth said, in the tongue of the ascendancy and in the ears of every Kethran within 4 light towers, "I am Ashit under a human fire. I did not kill the voice. Corvan Kethra killed the voice, and I say it with his hall's own light in my hand, and I will say it standing in front of him, and let any man here call me a liar to my face." The mast burned for 81 seconds. Then the inverters went, all 4 of them, in a rolling series of concussions that blew the shed door off its hinges and put Emmett flat on his back with his ears full of bees, and the corona died, and the fence wires went silent, and the snow came down out of the air. And on the Larke holding, 6,000 soldiers stood absolutely still in the dark. Emmett crawled out of the shed. He got maybe 10 meters before his legs stopped, and he ended up on his knees in the snow in the middle of his own yard. And that was where he was when Corvan Kethra came through the ranks with a sidearm in his hand. The marshal was not smiling. He came across the snow fast and straight, past his own frozen soldiers, and none of them touched him and none of them stopped him, and he raised the sidearm as he came and pointed it at the boy on his knees in the yard. "You," he said. His voice was perfectly calm. That was the worst of it. "Do you know what you've done? Do you have any idea what you have let out into the sky? The ascendancy will come apart. Houses will burn. Millions, boy, millions asterisk because a farm child could not keep a door shut." The half-smile came back, and it was awful. "You should have made the call." Emmett Larke looked up the barrel of the gun. He was very tired. His hands were burned, and he could not hear properly, and there was blood frozen on his shirt. And he thought about his father, and about a road that was closed, and about 3 hours. "You could have knocked," he said. Corvan fired. Or he would have. His finger was already moving. But a hand came down on the marshal's wrist and took it, and turned it, and the shot went into the snow. It was a young Kethran officer with a sub-marshal's single bar at his throat, his helmet off, his face wet, shaking so hard he could barely hold on. He did not let go. "Sir," he said in his own tongue, and the little cracked weather panel behind Emmett dutifully rendered it in human script, because nobody had thought to turn it off. "Sir." I was in the hall. Behind him, along the whole ruined fence line, the ninth host began to ground their weapons. It was not a mutiny. There was no shouting. 6,000 soldiers simply reversed their rifles and set the muzzles in the snow and stood there with their hands folded, rank by rank, the way Kethran soldiers had stood for 900 years in the presence of an unmade house. And the herald walked down the lane with his eyes bound and his hands out, and stopped, and said, into a silence you could have built a wall out of. Corvin Kethra, you came with blades to a covered fire. They took him at dawn. Emmett watched from his kitchen doorway with a blanket around his shoulders and a dog leaning on his leg, and he did not entirely understand what he was watching, and he understood all the same that it was the end of something 900 years long. They cut the double gold bar off the marshal's throat and offered it to the herald, and the herald did not take it but let it fall in the snow, and nobody picked it up. Then they walked him up the lane between two ranks of his own men, and not one of them looked at him. The sun came up over the 9 Sisters, and down the west road, where the ruts ran to Bell Hollow, Emmett saw lights. Not Kethran lights, yellow ones. Hand lamps and truck lamps and the swinging paraffin lanterns homesteaders kept for the lambing, coming up the shelf in a straggling line, 40 of them, 50, every holding within 6 hours' drive. Because every screen on the Coldshelf had lit up at 4 in the morning with a picture of an old man dying in a hall, and then with a picture of a barn that everyone in the district recognized, and Hattie On, who was 71 and had buried 2 husbands and did not care for the ascendancy in the slightest, had gotten on the district band and said one sentence, "That's the Larke boys' barn." They came up that road toward 6,000 armed aliens with nothing but lanterns, because a 19-year-old they had known since he was born was standing in the middle of it, and you do not leave a neighbor out in the cold. They, wrapped in 4 blankets on a stretcher of Kethran make, watched them come. "Your people," she said. "Yeah." "They have brought asterisk lamps." "Yeah." "Against an army." "They didn't really think it through," said Emmett. "No," said Aravitel Sameth and closed her eyes. "No, that is not it at all." She did not stay long. She could not. There was a chair standing empty in the Hall of Ash and a house to rebuild and an accounting that was going to take years, and they came for her at noon in a white flyer with the seal of the voice on it, and she went up the lane on her own feet because she refused, absolutely, to be carried. At the gate she stopped. She looked at the enamel plate on the doorpost, the little scratched square that had been there since before Emmett was born that said, in the language of an empire, the keeping of fire and threshold, in the manner of a house. Then she went back inside. She came out with a coal. It was in a plain glass lamp off the kitchen shelf, and inside it, on a bed of ash, sat one small live coal from the Larke stove, glowing dull orange in the daylight. "There is a last part of the law," she said. "The guest who leaves a covered fire takes a coal from it, and while the coal burns, the debt lives." She held the lamp against her chest with her good arm. "This one is going to burn in the Hall of Ash, in the hearth of the voice. It will be fed every day by the hands of my house for as long as my house exists, and every Kethran who comes to petition the voice will walk past it, and they will ask what it is, and they will be told." Her pale eyes came up. "They will be told that it came from a human hearth on a cold shelf, where a boy of 19 opened a door to a woman with a hole in her, and asked her nothing." Emmett looked at the ground. His ears were still ringing. He did not have anything to say. "Boy," said Emmett. He looked up. "When my father was killed," she said, "I ran for 9 days, through 3 worlds. I passed 600 hearths and I did not stop at one of them because I knew asterisk with absolute certainty, the way you know the ground is down, that there was not a door in this arm of the galaxy that would open for me." She smiled. It was a strange thing on that face, and it was real. "And then I fell down in a field of vines." She got into the flyer. And Emmett Larke stood at his gate, in his father's coat, and watched the ninth host go home. They went out the way they had come, in perfect order, 6,000 of them, down the frozen lane and past the broken fence and up over the shoulder of the 9 sisters. It took 4 hours. And every single one of them, as they passed the Larke gate, every soldier, every gunner, every Walker crew, every cook and clerk and stretcher-bearer of an army that had spent the night surrounding one small house on a marginal world, reached out and touched their hand to the doorpost. Hand to the lintel, the old salute, the thing a Kethran does at the door of a hearth that has kept the covered fire. 6,000 times. It went on so long that the neighbors stopped watching. It went on so long that Hattie Ann made tea, and the tea went cold and Scupper fell asleep in the sun. It went on until the light went long and gold across the Coldshelf, and the last rank came down the lane, and the last soldier, a boy Emmett's own age, gray-faced, exhausted, stopped, put his hand flat on the wood and looked at Emmett for 2 full seconds. He did not look away like a man at a fence post. Then he went, and the lane was empty, and there was nothing left on the Larke holding but a broken window, 4 dead inverters, 6,000 bootprints in the snow, and a fire that had not gone out. Emmett Larke went inside and shut his door and put the kettle on.